We're going to be talking about mind, Swedenborg, and politics.
Yes, so I just thought if we're gonna be on YouTube, we might as well be controversial.
Love it. Right, let's go for it then. So, shall we start with mind? What's on your mind?
Yeah, we can. Although I do want to tell you, Daniel, I listened to your podcast with your oldest friend. I can't remember the guy's name.
Yeah, Matthew. Yeah,
yeah. Okay, yeah, Math with an F. So so I listened to that, and it was really entertaining because obviously you guys are a little older than me, and I have a friend that I grew up with from a really young age as well, the one I do the podcast with, Kyle, and a lot of what you were talking about just reminded me of stories growing up with him. When we first met, you were telling the story about your dad telling you to give your friend something, to give him a toy, but to give him your best toy. you were struggling with that, and it just made me think about this Ghostbuster. It was the Ghostbuster fire station house that I had when I was a kid, and I dragged that over to Kyle's house, and you put the slime in the top, and it drips down through the firehouse. And anyway, it was the early 90s, and Ghostbusters were a big deal. But as you were telling that story, I was just smiling and laughing of all the hijinks you get into when you're young, and just having a buddy to do it with.
Yeah, and there's something about I don't know, when it's your oldest mate and you've got so many memories, there's always that banter there as well, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
You know. Yeah, I was just listening back to a few of them the other day, and it's like we've got something really special, and I'd imagine you and Kyle probably have as well, haven't you?
Oh, 100%. Now, did you remember anything differently than he did when you guys were talking?
A few of the stories that are sort of third-hand stories that we've heard, that we shared. Yes, sometimes there was sort of ways I remembered the story had been told to me, and he sort of picked it up third hand, a different way. But generally speaking, the actual memories that we experience, no, they're pretty much the same. Yeah.
It's interesting because there's things that Kyle and I remember differently, and I have a twin sister, and her and I remember things differently. It's like we grew up together. We shared a bedroom. We lived the exact same lives, and her and my memories are divergent. I'll put it that way. It's just interesting,
Yeah, no, me and Math, generally speaking, I think we tend to remember almost exactly the same way that things happened.
All right, then. Maybe it's me. But I guess that's a good segue into mind.
Mind.
Yeah. So as far as mind goes, this is what I was thinking about. I've had some interactions with people on Twitter, and I noticed this with Joe Rogan, listening to his podcast, is that he will talk a lot about psychedelics and a lot of things that have to do with mind and consciousness. And he uses the word mind all the time. And what he means by that is brain. And on Twitter, I'm having the same problem, that you get into conversations with people when you're trying to talk about things like you and I have no problem talking about. It's like, can you conceptualize God as consciousness or mind or something like that? And it seems like, by and large, people can't separate the idea of mind from a physical body.
Absolutely, yeah. I get the same thing actually. By mind, I'm not thinking of the brain. The brain to me is a physical thing, whereas the mind is a spiritual thing, an abstract thing, something that's intangible. The way I've likened it to in the past is, when you're driving a car, you've got the driver, and the driver uses the steering wheel to steer the vehicle. Just as an illustration there, I think of the vehicle as the body, the brain as the steering wheel, and the mind as the driver.
I like that. I like that.
And it's, there's this kind of higher self that is basically, moving your body around and directing your body, but it's using your brain to do that. But this idea that the brain is what produces consciousness, I've never really bought into that.
See, that's an interesting topic, and that's exactly what it is, especially when I'm talking to atheists
Mm,
or materialist, rationalist type people. Um, they think that the brain produces mind,
mm,
and what you and I are saying is something more like, and I'll have to be fair because Joe Rogan has said this before on the podcast many times, that there's an alternative approach to understand consciousness, at least. He won't use the word mind, but consciousness to mean, or the brain rather, as a receiver of mind, as a receiver of consciousness, rather than
mm.
as a producer of it.
That's it. Yeah.
And here's what trips me up is that I'm is you know this, but I'm the idealism and panpsychism or as ideas appeal to me, and I try to imagine what that means. Like an idealist might say that everything is mind, so that matter and energy and the laws of physics exist within mind. So mind becomes a place. It becomes a place, and it's just so strange for me trying to make
Mm.
sense of that. So I just wanted to open up the topic. What do you think?
Maybe rather than place, what about the word container?
Mm. I like
You know,
that.
the
Well,
absolute mind is the container of all these things that are happening.
see, I like that, but at the same time, I have to respect that the container is infinite. And so how do you make sense of a container that has no boundaries? Right? It's like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
When I'm very much going down the route these days. I've mentioned it to you before of Advaitism.
Yes.
The idea of non-duality, that there is just one thing at the end of the day, and that one thing is source or Brahman or God, or let's just say mind, for example. And then everything that is a projection of that. So pure mind or pure source at the end of the day doesn't really have kind of any attributes, whereas the projection, which is us and the universe and everything that seems real, does have attributes. And I think they're moving on from that. There's then probably sub minds, if that makes sense. There's the ultimate mind that is kind of projecting all of this into reality, and then each of us, as illusory as it is, each of us has the ability then to experience mind ourselves, and then we can actually create things as well. But ultimately, behind it all, there's just this one mind that's creating everything into existence.
So when you use the word project,
Mm.
I agree with you. I really, honestly, that makes perfect sense to me. But I can't help but imagine that what's being projected has to be projected somewhere. So we get back to place again. And I guess the only way I can really make sense of that is to suggest that whatever mind is projecting within itself. So mind becomes object as well as space or place. It's really difficult to conceptualize. But that's kind of where I struggle. And the other thing that you bring up about subminds, it reminds me of this idea of dissociation that we talked about once or twice before, when particularly when we're talking about Bernardo Kastrup. So if you have a source mind, if you have a God mind,
the ultimate reality, if you will.
Yes. So you might imagine subminds existing within that structure. And if we have to stick to the oneness idea that you brought up, which I 100% agree with, then you kind of have this image of a projection within, because there's only one thing. Now the subminds seem to be created either by being created as a separate entity, or by dissociating somehow from the wholeness of that primordial universal mind, because we have to stick with the oneness, because that appeals to my mystic intuition, and it appeals to my sort of philosophical preferences.
Well, this is why I think the the kind of fragmentation that gives you sub-minds, my mind, your mind, that seems separate to the ultimate mind, I think that is, first of all, that's an illusion. I think if you were in my body, so to speak, I don't think you'd feel any different than you do now.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think our brain and our body kind of limits or affects our personal experiences, but I think the ultimate driver behind it all is the same across the board. It's like you've said before about fractalism, isn't it? Where
Yes.
you've got the ultimate mind. If that fragments, it can't be anything other than identical to the original source. So my mind is identical to source. If I was source, this is how I'd feel. If I was to swap bodies and brains with you, I'd feel the same. I'd feel like the same person still, but I would just find that my brain, my body kind of affects my experience. So it would be slightly different, but ultimately we're the same consciousness.
No, I agree with that. 100%. I'm a little bit embarrassed to bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. So I had an experience with dissociation not long ago, and it had to do with having too much to drink. So this is what I'm embarrassed to say, because listen, I didn't grow up doing a lot of heavy drinking. I don't have a history of losing time. There's been a couple of instances when I was younger where maybe I had a little bit of that, if I was drinking heavily, and maybe I lost like the end of the night. I was staying up late anyway. The end of the night, sort of foggy. Well, this happened to me maybe it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where I went out with friends, had a little bit too much to drink, started early, and I had a really rough night. And if I'm being honest, I woke up regretting it. I woke up regretting it, but I couldn't remember a large chunk of the evening, and that's never happened to me before.
It's really unsettling, isn't it?
It's tremendously unsettling. I wasn't sure how that would come across to you. One of the Americans, British, or the English, is that you drink really well, you guys, and you drink regularly. You handle larger quantities of alcohol. So this may be par for the course. I don't know, but for me, it's disturbing because
it's funny because I don't actually drink. Because I'm against drinking. I mean, occasionally I suppose I'll have a glass of wine or a lager or something with a curry, but I've never been a drinker.
It's not my favorite, but from time to time,
I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And the older I get, the less I enjoy the after effects.
That's what I like. Cups of tea. Can I? I don't want to sort of cut across you there, but you just saying about this sort of unsettling experience of kind of, it's almost like not existing for a period of time, isn't it?
Exactly.
There was a situation that I experienced. So when I was a child, I've talked about it in my podcast before. When I was around about the age of 11, I actually suffered abuse at school by a teacher that abused me at school, and the long and short of it is, I basically, at the age of 11, had a massive mental breakdown. Just at the age of 11, that's quite a big thing. And I was under a psychiatrist, who back in those days, the psychiatry was a bit weird. They used to make you do some really weird exercises, like sort of drawing pictures of your dreams and all this sort of thing to try, and ascertain, sort of things from your childhood and all that kind of weird stuff, But it didn't work. So I was put under a doctor who said, I'm going to give you medication. And basically, they were like these kind of tranquilizers, I suppose, that just basically stopped me from overthinking things, just sort of numb me a bit. But I've got the weirdest thing that happened to me. I remember being 11 and I remember being 13, but I don't remember the in-between bit.
What?
I know. I woke up one morning, and I felt really disoriented. And I said to my mum, how old am I? And she said 13. And
What?
13. I thought I was 11. And there's this massive gap of 2 years where I don't remember a thing. It's almost like my mind went offline for a period of time to deal with the trauma.
But you were still obviously living every day of your life, having your breakfast, going to school.
Well, I wasn't going to school because I was so ill at the time, but I was, presumably, I was getting up and eating and drinking and going back to sleep. And all that. But I can't remember. I think I remember 11, I remember 13, and there's this massive gap in the middle. And even today, that's unsettling. It sort of feels a little bit like I've got a big chunk missing from somewhere.
That's astonishing, Daniel. When you think about that, right? When you think about that now, what kind of feelings does that make you have? Like, what do you think when you try to imagine that dark hole of a year of your life that's missing?
It just feels unsettling. I think similar to what you were just saying there. If you've drunk a bit too much and you basically your brain goes, or your mind even goes offline, doesn't it? And then it comes back on, and it just feels like the world carried on and I wasn't part of it for a period of time.
Yeah, that is a strange thing. So I was going to tell you, and your example is so much more dramatic. So this isn't gonna fall quite the same way. But I remember sitting down for lunch, kind of a late lunch. We went to get sushi. We'd already had something to drink, so we were like, let's get some food in our bodies. That'll be a good idea. So we got sushi. We start eating. I remember the appetizer. At some point, we ordered sake. I don't remember that. The next thing I remember is waking up in the middle of the night sick. So I lost 4 hours or 5 hours of time. And exactly like you just explained, it's like my consciousness, my memory jumped from appetizers to throwing up at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing in between. And it's been a week or two since, and none of those memories have come back. They're gone.
It's almost like the fractal mind, the fragmented mind, let's say call it a submind. It's almost like that goes offline for a period of time, isn't it?
Yes.
Presumably the ultimate mind is still carrying on, and reality continues, doesn't it? And other people haven't missed that chunk, presumably.
Right. Yes.
But this body, this brain, it's almost like for a period of time the mind wasn't connected to this body and this brain, because I do think the brain stores memories. I do think the brain uses the brain is like a storage system that will actually store the memories of this actual body kind of thing. And if the mind is offline, I suppose it's almost like if the mind is offline, those memories are not being written to the brain, are they? So there's no way to access what happened during that period of time. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, that's exactly what I imagine happened. And I'll tell you why I think it's so disturbing. You tell me if this sounds right to you. This is something I've been toying with for a while, but it seems like to me that our experience of the world is obviously through our conscious experience and our memories of our conscious experiences.
Yep.
So there isn't, at least for us individually, there isn't a difference between when the cosmos was created and when we became conscious, when we came online. And there isn't a difference between when we die, let's say, when we go offline and the end of the world. That's Armageddon. That's Armageddon as far as we're concerned. That's why there's a fear of death in general. It seems to me that our conscious experience is deep down, it's synonymous with the creation and destruction of everything, because
Mm.
all we know is our consciousness. And if it disappears, the world is gone. And that's a terrifying thought. And that's what happened to me. I was gone for 5 hours. The world was gone, you know?
I suppose people that have some of these like near-death experiences as well, it's a bit like that, isn't it?
I think so.
You know, it's like they go somewhere else for a period of time and they sort of come back into the body and, oh, what's been happening while I've been gone?
Imagine those people that are in comas for a long time and come to.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. You imagine waking up and sort of thinking it's still 1970. That must be awful.
Awful. Awful. That's a horror movie, Daniel. That's a horror movie.
Yeah. I'd have thought you just triggered a thought there. You know, like we're having these conscious experiences now. You know, all these memories being made and what have you. At the point that you die, that last thought that you have before you die, does that last thought just vanish, or does that last thought feel like it continues forever?
That's a
I
good
mean,
question.
that very last moment, just before the lights go out, that last thought that you have. I mean, does it go from that to nothing, or
Well, let me give you
can you
a
just continue thinking,
possibility.
you know, beyond?
Let me give you a possibility of, you know how they say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's the truth, but I've heard it many times that you see flashes of memories going from your earliest to your latest, that you kind of relive your life in the moments of your death. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you're looking at me like maybe you have not heard that before, but that seems like something that that people say.
Hmm.
So my thought is that last moment. So imagine this. Imagine it's a fractal moment. I live my life, I die. In my last moment of death, I relive my life. That includes the moment of my
Hmm.
death where I relive my life. So imagine
Oh,
that.
and then it
Imagine
just
I
goes
die. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. Your life
over and
over
over
and
and over.
over and over and over. Then it's fractal. Then it mirrors the fractal nature of reality. It's a hippie idea. It's probably wrong. It appeals to me because it
That
matches
makes a
that
lot of
fractal.
sense. Yeah. Oh God, it's like I've often said with reincarnation. If reincarnation's true, knowing my luck, I'd come back as me.
Exactly the same. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Ugh.
uh,
Um,
there you go. So that's mind.
that's
Mind.
mine.
I'm with you on that one, Chris. I think mind is outside of the brain, and I think when we do die, you know, the consciousness just continues. I think that's what happens.
I agree.
You know, the body and brain go offline, but I think you just realize that you are the ultimate, and then at some point you reincarnate back into another body.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I might resist the idea of retaining memories when you're reborn. It seems to me that the spirit of life, the force of life, whatever that is, it follows the same rules of nature everything else does, meaning that it can't be created or destroyed. So there's no beginning or end to conscious experience, and
Mm.
there really isn't a distinction between any forms of consciousness. Which goes back to that question of mind that we started with. And the reason why I think you have to make a distinction between mind and brain is if you think about other living creatures that don't have brains. It's a really easy example. You talk about a flower, or you talk about something like that.
Mm.
Um, the argument could be made that it has mind, that it has experience, but it doesn't have a brain. So how far do we have to go to discredit the idea that mind and brain are somehow dependent upon one another?
I don't think mind is dependent on brain. I think for humans and animals, I think the brain is just the way that the mind controls the body. I think that's it.
Mm.
So I think it's completely conceivable that a flower, for example, that probably doesn't even need a brain,
Right.
you know,
Right. Isn't that
um,
interesting? What does that
doesn't need a
mean
brain,
then?
but, it doesn't have to walk or go anywhere, does it?
No, it doesn't.
I would imagine I mean, I've often thought that everything has consciousness at some level. It might not be our level of consciousness. A cabbage has probably got consciousness, but it probably doesn't think the way that we do. But I would
Right.
imagine a cabbage has experiences.
I have no doubt. I
That
have no
sounds
doubt.
crazy.
So, I don't know if you've heard this before, but there's been a couple things I've heard along those lines. One of them is that if a certain bug, beetle, I don't know what it is, if a certain bug
Excuse me.
shows up in a forest and it's a predator for a particular tree, it's going to eat and damage this particular tree. That when the bugs start to eat the tree, that there are signals that get
Mm,
sent to the trees in the vicinity through the mycelial network of fungus in the earth and the roots and all that. It will communicate to the forest, and the other trees will change their chemical structure to become bitter to the plant, to the bugs. So they literally will communicate with each other. How is it? I mean, how could we say that they're not having an experience of being eaten if they're
oh.
warning the other trees?
They
You
they
know?
call that I've heard that referred to as the wood wide web.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
So they must be
Um,
having experiences,
oh,
and
I
they
think
have no
so.
brain.
I
You
think
know?
so. I mean, just the fact that, if you wire a plant up to a device and cause it stress, you will detect something on the device if you're stressing the plant out, if you're pulling leaves off it or whatever.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and if you watch those awesome time lapse videos of plants,
mm,
you can watch the flower following the sun, right? It
mm,
doesn't have eyes. How is it seeing the sun? How does it know where to move? And yet it knows. Certainly, it's having an experience of some kind. You
yeah,
know?
I agree. Totally agree. Yeah. There's mind behind everything, which comes back to you mentioned about panpsychism, didn't you? All is mind,
Right.
and there is mind in all, I think.
Yep. So I think ultimately we have to either choose, and I'm really struggling to choose whether mind exists within all things or whether all things are mind. And if there's a difference between those two, I really one side dualism, on the other psychism, like, and psychism um, allows for a material universe. It just
Mhm.
says that material universe is always connected to consciousness. All objects have it. Then there's the idealism side of things, which says, well, there may not be matter at all. Matter may just be a thing existing in mind, and in some degree, it's a hallucination. It's
Yeah,
real to
I
you.
I go along that route.
So
Yeah.
you prefer the idealism route? I think I'm leaning that way.
Yeah, I think I don't think anything is real. I think real as in tangible and it's I think everything is just ultimately it's all a dream. I think it's a dream within the mind, the ultimate mind.
So this actually sets up the Swedenborg conversation really well.
Swedenborg,
Yes,
Swedenborg,
Swedenborg.
Swedenborg.
So Swedenborg, I did a podcast on.
Mm,
Swedenborg is a mystic. I want to say, yeah. In fact, I know from Sweden, right? Swedenborg. He was knighted by the monarchy during his time. I think he lived in the 1600s. He was a scientist and was well respected, but he was a very mystical guy and said some very strange things. And one of the things he said I wanted to ask you about, because
mm.
I haven't really had the chance to think about it deeply, and so I think maybe we can do some thinking together on this. So Swedenborg said, well, let me give you a little bit more background. I had read Sir Humphrey Davy's book called Consolations in Travel before I
Mhm.
read Swedenborg. And if you don't know Sir Humphrey Davy, as a Brit, you should. But
Yep.
he, he was a scientist. Also, he was knighted, Sir Humphrey Davy, obviously, a very well-respected scientist. And when he died, he wrote a book on his deathbed that is the craziest little book you've ever read in your life, where he claims to have gone to outer space with the help of a spirit, and was taken around the planets and shown the supernatural creatures that exist on the planets and the stars and space. And it's very, very strange. There's a lot of similarities between Sir Humphrey Davy and Emanuel Swedenborg. They were both knighted. They were both credible academics. They both went very mystical in their life. And they both talk about supernatural beings existing in outer space. This is not a heavenly realm. This is not another dimension. This is in the heavens that we can see with our naked eye.
Universe. Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what Swedenborg said that I want to ask you about. He said that one of the things he was shown is that in the sun, you have a representation of God. I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just going to stumble through it. He says that imagine that there's a supernatural realm that's just as much a part of the physical here and now, that's always behind the scenes, always potent and effective in the world, but invisible to us. It's like the other half of the world that we never see. It's the dark side of the moon. And in that supernatural non-being realm, whatever that is, that's where God exists. That's where that's really the realm of fundamental reality. And on the other side of that coin is the material cosmos, you and I and the stars and the planets and everything else. So on one half of the coin, you have God. On the other side, you have material reality, but they're one thing. And Swedenborg says that the sun is a sort of a pathway, or a sort of a transformation vector. I'm using words I don't even understand right now, so I'm trying to explain. So imagine that God's love, this is what he says. By that he means the creative, generative force of life and energy, whatever is needed to make consciousness and life a possibility, whatever is needed to make material reality a possibility. It flows through from the spiritual world into this world, the world of being. The portal between them is the sun.
Okay.
So the heat and light, the electromagnetic energy and the force of gravity and all that stuff that comes out of the sun starts off as God on the other side. It passes from non-being into being through a star. So a star is like a portal to the other world, to the world of God, the realm of God, our other side. So before I say anything more, what do you think of this?
That immediately made me think of a scripture.
Ooh, I'm interested.
Right, let me just see if I can find this scripture. See if we can find this. So you're basically talking about the sun as being a portal there of God, okay? And the sun, of course, is a source of light. There's a scripture in Psalm 36, verse 9, referring to God, that says, "For with you is the source of life. By light from you, we can see light."
The hair standing up my arms.
Ooh.
That's good, man. That is good.
I've often thought that there is actually a connection between God and light. Light is a very unexplainable thing, isn't it?
It sure is.
Everything physical depends on light. Light is directly related to time and existence.
Yes.
And that would make an awful lot of sense if what we perceive as the sun, or indeed other stars, not necessarily limit it to the
Exactly.
Not necessarily limit it to the sun.
Exactly. Every star, every cosmos is a portal. So I want to talk to you more about light, but before I do, I want to mention one other thing that might make this more magical for you, hopefully. So one of the things to note is that according to our best theories in physics, the universe began in a singularity that we call the Big Bang. And the energy from that singularity did one thing first. It seemed to have created space-time, at least something like that, and then immediately starts forming stars. That's what it does.
Yep.
So the Big Bang creates stars, then the stars create everything else. And so that's one thing. The other thing to remember is that when a star dies, it turns into a black hole.
Yes.
And a black hole is a singularity, just like the Big Bang, just like the thing that started it all. That's where it ends, in a singularity. And up until recently, we knew that the black holes would suck everything in, including light, by the way. The only thing that light can't escape. It sucks everything in because of its tremendous gravity, and there's no escape. Nothing ever comes back out of a black hole.
Yep.
Then an article came out not all that long ago, and if I could share my screen, I will pull this up for you. Let's see, this one right here.
Just,
you see that, Daniel?
I can. Let me just show this. There we go.
All right. So maybe you've seen this article before. It came out a little while ago. This one's from Harvard, and it says, "We've never seen anything like this before. Black hole spews out material years after shredding a star." So this is the first time that we have seen, obviously this is not a real photo, but this is the first time that we have seen some reversal in how a black hole works. It seems to be doing something, at least in this one instance, completely contrary to what it should do. I'm going to stop the share now. Daniel just wanted to show that. But here we have evidence of a star that is spewing forth into being, into this dimension, into the space and time that we see around us, matter and energy. It's not just sucking it in. Now it's actually been seen spewing it out, which nobody ever thought was possible before. So it makes you wonder, what's on the other side of the event horizon? We don't know.
Maybe a mirror universe of sorts.
It could be a mirror universe, or it could be exactly what Swedenborg said it was.
God.
The other side of that portal could be God.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever that means. I don't know what that means.
Just as you were saying that, so obviously I was brought up on the Bible, and there's so many different scriptures that just pop to mind there. Like there is a scripture in James 1 verse 17 that refers to God as being the father of the celestial lights. That's an interesting one. And
Yes.
then light itself, it's been sort of postulated in the past that there is some kind of medium through which light travels, because light it can be seen as a particle, it can also be seen as a wave, and waves, generally speaking, travel through something, don't they? But it's certainly not it's not air that it travels through, because the vacuum of space, you've still got light traveling through it. So it's always been a bit of a mystery. They sort of came up with this idea at one point that there was an ether,
the luminiferous ether. Yeah.
There's actually a scripture in Job. So if you remember the story of Job, where Job is sort of afflicted with all these pains and what have you, and he starts getting a little bit moany about it, and claiming that he's a righteous man and he shouldn't be going through all this hassle. And at the end of Job, God actually speaks to him and says, I'm going to put you in your place. You're not so clever as you think you are. And he starts telling him all sorts of things about creation, different animals and sort of things like that. But he actually, in Job 38, he actually discusses light. And in verse 24, God says to Job, "Where now is the way by which the light distributes itself?"
Interesting.
So he actually asks Job in that verse, how does light travel? Interesting.
It is interesting. There's lots of interesting things about light. I did at least one episode. I think it was called "What's the Deal with Light?" Maybe that's what it was called. But it was talking about a lot of the same things that you brought up, because light is more than light, right? Light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's the visible, right? The visible side of the spectrum, but it's larger than that. Includes, X-rays and gamma rays and, all these various types of things. It's basically the energy that permeates the universe. It's not just what you can see, but it's also that. And it's tied to the fundamental physics of reality, like you already pointed out. Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. That seems to be a limit to physics.
That's the limit. Yeah. You see, if you were to sort of get the closer you get to the speed of light, effectively, if you could reach the speed of light, you would actually become a spirit being. Effectively, you wouldn't have a body anymore.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and then there's also the idea that the observable universe is only like what we like. The limits of our knowledge are only, the upper limits of our knowledge are what we can see in terms of how far away can we still detect light. So even not only does light show the upper limit of what's possible in physics, because like you said, it's connected even to time. Like time slows down as you approach the speed of light. But it also is the upper limit of our knowledge of the cosmos. We can only see as far as we can detect light. It's very strange.
Yeah. And if time slows down as you approach the speed of light, that would suggest that if you did reach the speed of light, not only would you be pure mind, you'd also have no concept of time.
Right. You would be non-temporal.
You'd be non-temporal, yeah.
You'd be eternal. Like God is said to be.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of religious references to light, not only the ones that you brought up from the Bible, which are tremendous, but also the fact that solar deities have always been, since the beginning of time, high gods. Amun-Ra in ancient Egypt, Sol in the Roman Empire, and on and on.
The sun itself has always been a focal point of those, hasn't it? I mean, I've got a friend actually that I'm going to be seeing him later today. I might just run this by him. He's always talking about how the God of the Bible is, Yahweh and so forth, is actually the sun, the actual physical sun.
Sure. Yeah, you can look at, we may have talked about this before, I think we did, but you can look at the prayers to Aten, which was that Akhenaten pharaoh in Egypt who said, you know what, there's only one God, it's the sun. We're not going to worship any of the other gods anymore. And he was hated for that, but he did do that, for a period of time. And in his prayers and images that you see directed at the sun, they sound like Christian prayers. They sound like a monotheistic prayer, and they were Akhenaten brought a monotheistic religion to ancient Egypt, and there's some connections between Akhenaten and the Judeo-Christian tradition for sure.
There's sorry to keep going on about the Bible.
No, go ahead.
Especially as I don't even really believe the Bible anymore. There's a scripture in Malachi that talks about God. God says, to you who are in fear of my name, the sun, that's S-U-N, the sun of righteousness will certainly shine forth with healing in its wings. And you will actually go forth and paw the ground like that little thought of the sun of righteousness shining forth with healing in its wings. Now, I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
If you trace Jehovah's Witnesses back, they go all the way back to what were known as the Bible students. It was a guy called Russell, Charles Taze Russell, that started it off, and he produced a series of books. This is way back in the 1800s, and I'm just going to see if I can pull up this cover of the book. So this is supposedly a Christian guy. I'm just going to pull this up. This is these are the books that he wrote, called The Divine Plan of the Ages. That was the first one. They were called The Studies in the Scriptures. Can you see the
Yes.
Can you see the emblem on the front? That's the wings.
Sort of. It does.
Wings of Ra.
Okay. You know what that looks like to me? There's another symbol of Ahura Mazda, which is interesting. That, in fact, let me just bring this up really quickly. Pull it up. Images. Here we are. This is a good one. Right. Here we go. Come on, a bigger picture would be good. Sorry.
That's what I'm struggling with. So the idea back then was, and I think they still teach this, that scripture that talks about the Son of Righteousness with healing in its wings actually refers to Jesus. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses teach.
Interesting. Let me show you this other image while we're at it. Let me see. Ooh, that's the wrong button. Share. Here we go. All right, look at this guy. Oh.
Two Tongues Podcast joined.
Do you see that?
Ah, yes, that's almost the same picture, isn't it? Isn't it?
Now, this is what I want to tell you that's interesting about this. This image here is the image of the god Ahura Mazda. That's the god of the Zoroastrian religion from ancient Persia, which has connections to Christianity. The Magi that came to see Jesus born, they belong to this. They belong to this religion. And Ahura Mazda was worshipped. They used to call them fire worshipers, right? Because they would have these temples where they would build a fire. They would have an eternal flame, and they would say their prayers and do their sacrifices to the fire. So I'm going to stop that share, but very similar. And there's a connection. It's not the sun that we're looking at, but it is fire we're looking at. And that's related as far as I'm concerned.
The sun is a big fire, isn't it? Effectively.
Big fire.
There's there's some really odd crossovers with a lot of these, what they Christians would say are pagan backgrounds, these Egyptians and Assyrians and all these and they actually find their way into Freemasonry as well, don't they?
They do indeed. Yeah, that whole all-seeing eye thing, that's the Eye of Horus. That goes back to ancient Egypt. So anyway, yeah. I just really think this idea of I never considered the idea that there might be a legitimate point of connection. Like, that image of Michelangelo, that Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, the creation of Adam, where God is, kind of holding his finger out and Adam is holding his finger out. They're like almost touching, in the image, and it's showing the creation of Adam. It's like that's a point between those two fingers where God literally touches his creation, reality. And I've never considered that might be a reality. There might be a place.
I wonder if that's why a lot of the, you've got like the Tower of Babel, meaning gate of the gods. You've got the pyramids. A lot of these things were linked directly with the sun, weren't they?
They were. They're also showing that ascension up to a point, right? That's heaven meeting the earth. That's the point where God and man and it's his creation touch. That's a beautiful image.
If they could reach the sun, maybe they could get through to the gods.
It's interesting to imagine that a star might be a place where God and its creation touch. And we can say all day long that the energy from the sun is responsible for not only the formation of our solar system, but also all of biological life that exists. Everything is dependent on the sun. And so
even down to those little flowers that follow the sun.
even down to the flowers, man. God. So I just wonder, and not on top of that, like we know this energy comes from the sun. And you can say, look, if hydrogen turns into helium and it lets off energy, this is what we're seeing. It's nothing more than that. But is it, you know? And then you combine that fact with the fact that suns turn into black holes, and that black holes can not only absorb all of reality, including light, but can also spew it forth to create new suns. I just wonder if there's some reality to this, and it's kind of freaking me out, Daniel.
Yeah, I think we're touching. I think as soon as you start getting into light and black holes and wormholes and all these sort of things, I think you literally are knocking on the door of a spiritual realm.
Yes,
I think this is why, you know, the scientists are doing sort of all these work with the, you know, hadron colliders and all this sort of thing.
Mm.
They're very, very, very close on the edge there. I think there's a huge possibility for things to go wrong there.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yep. So that's Swedenborg.
That's Swedenborg. Yep.
Mark Guy.
It's interesting. I think there was something else I wanted to add, but now I'm losing it. I know what I wanted to say. One of the things that I have been thinking about recently is I told you before, but I've got 2 young girls, and my oldest is 6, and she goes to church with her aunt and uncle. We don't attend church, my wife and I, but she goes with her aunt and uncle, and I think it's good that she does. But now that she's getting older, I'm thinking to myself, there are things that I want to do, if she's interested and open to it, to tell her what I think about God, because she's learning about it at church. And I don't agree 100% with what she's learning. I don't want to keep her from learning it. I want her to be exposed, but I also want to share with her what I think. And I don't know when is appropriate to do it and how much I can lay on her at one time. But one of the things I want to be able to do, and I've been thinking about this, so tell me what you think. So one of the examples, all right, I don't know exactly how to say this. I want to tell my daughter that there are ways that she can understand God as being present, as being real and being present and even being visible. If I could point to the sun and say, look, you see that up there? That's a portal. Just ask Swedenborg. On the other side of that sun is God. And you can look up and see it and have proof in your soul that that's a reality. Because I never had that. Nobody ever gave me that. It was just like, believe it because your parents believe it. There's no evidence of it. And this is tied together with another thought that I was having, where if I'm having like an internal dialogue with myself, if I'm worrying about something, if I'm planning for the future, if I'm asking questions, if I'm thinking through a problem, I have this dialogue in my head. Even if I'm just speaking, silently to myself, I always felt like I wasn't alone, that there was somebody listening to me. Like I'm speaking in my soul. It's not audible. I'm just speaking words in my mind. And I always felt like it wasn't words into the darkness, that there was somebody hearing those words. I considered that it was me hearing those words. But as I get older and more mystical, I no longer see it quite like that. I see it as God listening to me, that absolute mind that's always there, that voice of conscience, that's the evidence, also a piece of evidence that God exists. And so I want to tell my daughter, like, when you find yourself in situations where you're worried and you're anxious, or when you're thinking through a problem, and you're speaking to yourself, that thing that's hearing you is evidence of God. That feeling you have that you're being heard, because I feel that way. I don't know if you do. Maybe it's just me.
That's an interesting thing, actually, because obviously I was raised believing in God, and a transcendent, separate God to me that I used to pray to.
Mhm.
And as time's gone on, I've kind of come around to this idea of non-duality, where effectively I am God, so are you, we all are. But here's the weird thing: I still find myself praying.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the time that I often end up praying is when I have a nice meal. So growing up as a kid, whenever we had a nice meal, we'd say a prayer, grace. We'd pray to, well, we used to pray to Jehovah and say, thank you for this nice food that's been provided this day for us. That kind of gratitude. Even now, I find myself doing that sometimes.
Yeah. See, I don't think that's wrong though.
No,
If you-
no, I don't. It's just on the Advaitist side of things.
Hmm.
Basically, if you believe in non-duality and that you are God and that everything is God, and basically there's no need to worship, there's no need to pray, because effectively you're just worshiping or praying to yourself. So there's no need to do it.
Right.
It's often said within Advaita Vedanta that if you do pray, if you do worship, not only is that potentially a useful thing, it could actually be vital to your spirituality.
Hmm.
So even though you don't need to worship, it's still good if you do.
I agree. I think that something that gets lost if you don't make a point to focus on it is gratitude.
That's it.
And in prayer, to me, has always been heavily oriented towards gratitude. It's not asking God for favors. It's thanking God for reality, and taking time out of your day to recognize that and acknowledge that is so important. And I think it does open up your spiritual life to be grateful.
You know what I think you're doing when you're actually doing that. So just step back for a moment. You've got the ultimate God, Brahman, source, whatever, this kind of singularity that fragments itself into all these other minds and creation in order to experience itself. Effectively, that's kind of what we're doing. When we come to realize that our identity is, that we are the ultimate, there is only one, this is it. When we then go and pray to a God, we're effectively doing the same thing that God originally did. It's like we're kind of fragmenting ourselves and putting a God out there in order to kind of give us this relationship, so we're not just on our own. I think there's always that sort of feeling, isn't there, that we're on our own and we need something out there sort of watching over us and looking after us.
Yeah. So if we imagine that God is fractal, which I think that psychedelic experience helps you to understand, but also nature helps you to understand that. What was it? Oh, that the notion that God is fractured into multiplicity, if that's true, and we're a mirror of God, we would expect to see the same thing in us, and we do.
That's it. That's
yeah. It happens with dissociation, but it also happens with just maturity. It's like when you become a different person, and that happens to you all the time. You're not the same person after a certain experience than you once were. What happened? What happened to the old you? You still kind of are that old you, but you're not. You fractured. Now you're more than one. Now you're more than one person in a strange way. It's interesting.
It is like a big loop again, isn't it? It's like God creates us and then we create God.
I think that's true. In fact, Daniel, I think that you put your finger on the pulse right there, because I think that whatever God is requires being. It requires material reality. It requires us. Yeah. So without us, there is no God. Without God, there is
two
no
sides of
us.
the same. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I totally agree with that.
It goes both ways, and religious people have a very hard time with that. But here's the way I would explain it. What is God without creation?
Right. Well, this in the Hindu belief, you've got Brahman with attributes and Brahman without attributes.
Hmm.
So basically, Brahman with attributes is the God that interacts with creation and projects creation. But if you take that away, what you end up with is a source God, Brahman, whatever you want to call it, that just is. It doesn't have any experiences. It doesn't have any real consciousness, nothing. It's exactly as you said there, that creation is necessary in order for source, God, whatever, to actually have an existence. On that basis, if Brahman is eternal or source is eternal, that would seem to indicate that creation is also eternal.
Absolutely.
There's no kind of, it's just one big circle.
That's what I think. That's what I believe. Yes. Yeah. The thoughts pop and then they go. I need to take more notes here, but yeah, absolutely.
So Swedenborg, clever
Swedenborg.
guy, and I think he's onto something there. Yeah, the sun and light and all that sort of thing. I think you're knocking on God's door when you start getting into that sort of thing.
I think so.
Absolutely.
So before I jump into politics, and I know this is your show, Daniel, so I don't want to take up. I don't want to.
No, this is our show. This is our show. It's a joint effort.
I was thinking about something, and I actually did. In fact, I told you about this. I did a episode of the podcast where I tried to do an interpretation, like a dream interpretation, but of a painting. And it's a Salvador Dali painting, who is a very strange man, and his art's very strange and psychedelic, you might say. It's full of images and it's interesting. So I decided I would try to do an interpretation, partly because I knew that how Dali interpreted it was available. You could read what he intended. And so the question was, the way I interpreted the image was really in no way like what the artist intended. And so the question I had was, when I look at an image and I get associations, thoughts, pictures, ideas come to my mind based on what I'm seeing, and then I can come up with what I think it means based upon all that, unconscious stuff that's going on. To me, it's a valid meaning. My interpretation is valid, but it wasn't what the artist intended. So the question is my interpretation valid or is it not? What do you think?
It's completely valid. Yeah. You just saying that reminds me, I write poetry and songs, and I've actually got a website called bipolarpoet.co.uk. I actually wrote a book of poetry called In Two Minds, and it was kind of inspired by my experience of manic depression and what have you, that was brought on by the trauma that I went through that I was speaking about earlier. But on the website, I've just got an introduction where it says, most likely as you read these poems, you will have a notion of what they mean, at least to you. It's not my desire to detract from your personal interpretation. The wonderful thing about a poem, or you could say a painting or a song or anything, is that it can have different meanings to different readers. But then you've got obviously the official interpretation, the intention of the creator. And then so I went on to explain what my poems actually meant for me. But I think you're dead right. I think everyone that approaches a work of art has their own idea of what it means. And I think that is as real as what it meant to the actual person creating the art in the first place.
Yeah, this is related to the idea that if you hear a song heard a million times, or if you read a book or watch a movie that you love, that at different times in your life, it means something different to you.
Yeah, it can do. Absolutely.
So I guess my broader question is, what does that say about meaning? It's like the artist had specific intended meaning, and I read
Yeah, I think you put your own meaning into things, don't you?
and I just wonder what that means. Does that mean that meaning? Because I imagine God a lot of times to be something like, you use the word God without attributes, and I like to think about God as being undifferentiated. So something similar. It's like God is all at once. It's undifferentiated. It's something like potential.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's what meaning is like, and if that makes it connected to God in some way that I haven't been able to understand. That, like God, meaning is infinite. Like it changes and morphs and becomes what it is specifically to you based upon your observation.
Well, this is why, everybody has their outlook on life, particularly when it comes to spirituality and religion. Who are we to say that the way that they view God is any less value than the way that we view God?
Right.
I'm a very big believer in that. It's very easy with religion, and I suppose with politics as well, which we'll come on to in a bit. It's very easy with things like this to take a very definite stand and say, this is the absolute truth. This is what, this is right, this is wrong, this is what it means, and everybody else is wrong. But I don't tend to think that now. I seem to think, as everybody's view on whatever it is, art, religion, politics, spirituality, to that person, it's real and it has meaning.
It definitely seems to, and I don't know. These are the thoughts I wanted to bounce off you, man. I just feel like
our own realities, haven't we?
Exactly right. Strange, isn't it? Yeah, we have our own realities, and yet we exist in the same reality. There's always, when I bump into paradoxes like that, I always raise my eyebrow. I think that it's a sign. Like whenever I bump into a paradox of that kind, I think it's a sign that I'm on to something. But whatever I'm on to is not something that can be understood. It's something beyond understanding. Something like what you experience in a psychedelic vision.
Yep.
It's supremely meaningful and beyond comprehension at the same time. A paradox. I think that's what God is, man.
God is a paradox. We're all a paradox. I'm definitely a paradox. I'm sometimes I think to myself, I'm the biggest contradiction going. I've got this kind of thing where I can express an opinion, and then the next day I'll express another opinion that means, just as much as the previous opinion to me, and they're completely opposites. And people can't get their head around it. It's like, hang on, you said this yesterday.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, I believe that. I also believe this. Yeah, but
you know how I answered that question, Daniel? I said what I said.
I said what I said. Yeah,
I said what I said.
And now I think this. Absolutely. I'm in a constant state of flux with my beliefs and thoughts. Sometimes I'll be quoting Hindu philosophy, another time I'll be talking about God, another time I'll be kind of talking about the Bible, or then I'm talking about the Upanishads.
Yeah, you and me both. I do the same thing.
They're not mutually exclusive, are they?
No,
they're really not. No.
So Daniel, I know you've got dinner plans. I don't know how much more time you have with me, but
no, we're good. I'm good up to about 6 o'clock. So
okay. So I can steer this direction into the political direction if you want to. You know what? Before I do, though, let me say something else that just recurred to me. This was what I wanted to bring up earlier. We were talking about God fracturing into multiplicity, so one thing becoming many, and how we become new people. Like psychologically, we become new people at different points in our life. We're different from what we once were. We have these transformative experiences. And one of the examples I wanted to bring up, and we may have talked about this before, but there's a philosopher named Hegel, a German philosopher named Hegel, who talks about consciousness in a weird way, in an ontological way, a lot like I do, where he talks about consciousness and God very much similarly. And he says that we find ourselves, I know I told you this before, he said we find ourselves consciousness within consciousness. It says we stand before ourselves as another consciousness. That's how he says it. And what he means, I think, is that people have a dual perspective.
Mm.
We one perspective, we're a subject, we're the person behind our eyes seeing the world. In another context, we're an object, just like any other object. Just like I look at you, I see Daniel as an object in the world. I'm like that. I'm an object in the world. But we're the only object that gets to be a subject too. Every other object is just an object. So we have these two perspectives of ourselves. Always.
Old thing about thinking, isn't it?
Thinking about thinking, yes. And then you see that feedback, right? Thinking about thinking, consciousness within consciousness, a pattern within a pattern. Then what we're describing is feedback. And feedback creates infinity. You know that. You do audio visual. Feedback creates infinity. And that's what we see in nature. That's that fractal thing that keeps coming up. The fact that it keeps coming up makes me believe it more and more and more.
Yep.
There's something to that.
Yep, I agree. Definitely agree with that.
All right, so here's the political question I have for you.
Oh,
And I'm very interested if you can talk openly about it. If not, I completely understand because this is controversial. In the United States, I've talked about this before. I'm just going to say in general, in the United States, people are more or less thrown into two categories: black people and white people. And there are others, but these are the two broad generalizations that you hear all the time. And in our country, in this country, we aren't connected to our history. And I don't know if you guys are in Europe more. I imagine you must be, because the black folks in the United States, many of them have a history of that goes back to the slave trade. And so the family history gets literally demolished. You just have no connection to your origins. And because there's such a strong emphasis in the early days of the United States to become American, to be what's the word they used? Assimilate, right? You had these immigrants who come over, and they're like from Ireland, or they're from Italy, or wherever they're from, and they want their kids to learn English. And many of those families wouldn't even teach their kids to speak Italian or Gaelic. They wouldn't teach them that because they wanted them to fit in. They wanted them to have a new life in America and to fit in and all that. It was important to them. So for that reason, the people that today get considered to be white, we have no connection really to what that means. So we have this imposition culturally where if you're of European origin, you're white and you're all the same. And if your skin is darker than a certain hue, guess what? You're black and you go into a certain category. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what cultural differences exist. And I always found that to be really sad.
Yeah.
The reason I want to ask you about this is because right now there's this cultural debate that's going on, and I'm sure it's going on in the UK as well, but here it's going on where racism has just kicked up and become this huge topic. We pretend racist on the streets. There's racial discrimination. It's everywhere you look. I think that is vastly overplayed. I think that is, in my day-to-day life, almost completely untrue. I don't experience any prejudice or racism in my day-to-day life ever. No. And yet you hear it on the news constantly that this is a problem. And so this is all connected to this idea of diversity. And one of the things that is being said in the United States is that white people don't contribute to cultural diversity. That in order for you to have brownie points for being diverse, white people simply don't count in the equation. What you need is minority groups. You need various minority groups. And that's how you get diversity. We as white people don't contribute to it. Another thing that's said is that black people can't be racist because white people are in power, and you can only be racist against people if you are marginalized, or racism only exists if you're marginalized. If you're in the majority, then nobody can be racist against you. Nobody can be prejudicial against you. That doesn't make sense. As far as I'm concerned, this is nonsense. This is this isn't the definition of any of those words. This is a whole strange social thing that's happening. But the question is, do white people contribute to cultural diversity? How would that question even sound to you as an Englishman?
That's interesting. This is only my experience of diversity and racism and so forth. Obviously, I am a white guy, so I can't speak from for black people and people of other races and so forth. But my observation of the UK when it comes to racism and so on, I think it does exist. Racism does exist, but I don't think it's anything like it is in the States. I really don't. I mean, we've now got a Christian king, a Hindu prime minister, and a Muslim mayor of London. And most reasonable folks are absolutely fine with that. They like the diversity, Whether or not, I get where you're coming from, like there's always this sort of thing where the minority groups need to sort of get more of a say and more exposure and more representation and so forth. Do white people need that? Probably not, because in the UK it is still predominantly white,
right?
But there are a huge amount of people from other cultures. I mean, where I live in Rotherham, if I just walk along the main street up from my road there's Indians, Muslims, Jews, Polish. They're all running their own little shops with their own sort of cultural foods and all this sort of thing.
Right.
And they all, I mean, they do speak English, but they all speak their own languages as well. It's a real mishmash, I don't think in the UK as a whole it's such a big deal as it is in the United States. I really
get that.
I think the UK is a lot more accepting of people of different backgrounds, and we're kind of. I know sort of at one point there was, we were a imperialism and all the rest of it, and the slave trade and all that. Just I know that existed in the past, but certainly in more recent history, particularly from the time of the war and so forth, there's been, particularly the Second World War, there's been an awful lot of acceptance of people of other nations. Well, I mean, we've accepted so many people into our country with all their different backgrounds and everything. To the point where it was actually becoming a problem. We were running out of room,
right?
Because we were being so accepted.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more of a sensitive question, but tell me you don't have to, but let me ask you this question.
Go for it.
Well, I think that your opinion of what race relations are like in America is very likely impacted by what you see in the media, which my personal experience has been that's largely bullshit. I think it would be largely, mostly. Like in the big cities, there's problems that people point to and say systemic racism, and there's probably good arguments for various reasons that you can make. But in the suburbs, in the country, and most of across this country, race relations aren't bad. People are very accepting. People enjoy multiculturalism, the way you described it with the shops and the food and all that. Like one of my favorite restaurants is this little Ethiopian restaurant, back home. It's I think it's probably more like what you experience in the UK than it seems. But one of the things I noticed in my lifetime is that interracial marriage, that was still a bit of a bumpy thing. It's not so much anymore, but when I was younger, it was still a little bit. I didn't see a lot of it, and when I did, there was tension surrounding that. Do you see that in the UK very much? Is interracial marriage common?
It's very common.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's very common.
Okay, well, that's
I've got to be careful here because there may be ones from sort of minority groups that are saying, oh, Dan doesn't get it, because he's not experiencing what we're experiencing.
right.
That
Yep.
may be the case, but from
Yep.
where I'm stood, see, the other thing you've got to take into account, just harping on about this, I was a Jehovah's Witness in the past, and Jehovah's Witnesses is a global. They refer to themselves as a global brotherhood, and racism is not a thing within Jehovah's Witnesses.
Sure. Same in Islam.
It's same in Islam.
Mhm.
Everybody loves each other. Now that may not be representative of real life out there. There may well be racism that there's always going to be some idiot that, talk, says things like, oh, coming over here and, all the rest of it. You've even got a political party in the UK, the British Nationalist Party.
Oh, okay.
BNP.
Okay.
Very, very anti anybody that's not white and British. But I think most reasonable folks basically think the BNP are nuts. Why should colour and culture make any difference at all? I was just watching PM's Question Time the other day, and we've got this new. we had the Queen died just before. We had Boris Johnson, didn't we?
Yes.
As a Prime Minister, he blew it.
Mm-hmm.
So the Queen appointed Liz Truss.
Mm-hmm.
She only lasted 45 days.
I know.
The Queen died, and now we've got a Hindu, Rishi Sunak.
Mm-hmm.
He's now Prime Minister. So we've had like three Prime Ministers in just over a month.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
But it's I was just watching the PM's Question Times, and the amount of Black people and Asian people and Muslims and Christians and so forth in the actual House of Commons is pretty well represented, I think.
Yeah. So that's good. Here, let me show you this.
What have you got there?
You see this little booty, this little shoe?
That looks like something that might be a Native American shoe, is it?
It does, doesn't it? It's from Finland. It's made of reindeer hide. It's a traditional shoe that my wife's family is from Finland and Sweden, and her grandfather he wore those when he was a kid. My wife's father wore them when he was a kid. My wife wore them when she was a kid, and now I just sort of keep them in my office. But the reason I bring them up is because, well, exactly what you brought up. You see those shoes and you think, are they Native American shoes? What's going on? Are they like from Siberia? What is this? That's kind of the point that I was making when in this country anyway, when the idea that white people don't contribute to cultural diversity, that we're just this blank stamp, we don't have anything to offer or bring anything to the table. I look at things like this that's completely distant from us in the United States. The idea that white people ever wore a shoe like this is the most distant thing from our minds. And I imagine that maybe it's not like that in the UK. And I'll tell you what I mean. In the United States, the government wants you to fill out a form. They're going to ask you to check your race on the form, which, by the way, I think is terrible. But
I always struggle with that. When there's a form and it says how do you identify, and I have to tick white British male.
Exactly. So, but the point is, you've got somebody who immigrates from Ireland during the potato famine. They come over to the United States. They have a Gaelic background. Or a Celtic background. They can speak, I don't know, whatever the languages are, a Gaelic language plus English. They have red hair and freckles. They come over here. They have a very specific heritage, a very specific religious heritage, cultural heritage, genetic heritage, language, all that. Then somebody immigrates from Sicily. And they're darker complected. They have a whole separate tradition of religious history and social history, and with the languages they speak. They come over to the United States, and both of them are filling out this form. And then you say, "I'm white. I'm white. And my point is,
Mm.
those people bring a tremendously different scope of diversity to the table.
Yeah,
And
the white bit is almost irrelevant, isn't it?
it seems like it.
Mm.
And even worse, you can look at people like, I don't know, maybe the Amish in the United States. They're a very, very, very low percentage of the population. They're a minority group by anybody's estimation. Or you look at people like the Basque people in Spain that live in the mountains. They literally don't belong to the Indo-European family tree that the rest of Europe belongs to. They're like an ancient people that survived in the mountains. Their culture is so deep and different from ours. Even their language doesn't even connect to the Indo-European language group. That's a minority group with a very specific cultural heritage that we could benefit from.
Mm.
But in this country, they're white, and it's gone. It's gone. And when you brought up earlier the shops, and you say you go down to the shops, and you have the Indian restaurant, and you have the Thai restaurant, and you have the Polish restaurant.
Mm.
Even in the United States, the Polish restaurant almost doesn't exist, because remember, we're all white. So European tradition here is almost whitewashed.
Mm.
And the same thing with African tradition. It's just as egregious. If you're somebody who's from East Africa and you're a Maasai, your lineage is Maasai people. When those people drink milk and blood from the cows that they herd around, and that's their culture. Their culture is to subsist off these cows and this nomadic lifestyle. That's so different from a San Bushman or from a West African tribesman, for somebody from the Congo or somebody from Morocco or Egypt. It's so different. But in this country, they're black, and it all goes away.
Yeah, there is a tendency to want to put people in boxes, isn't there?
There is.
And the boxes don't always describe who you are. I mean, I'm someone who absolutely loves diversity. Absolutely love it. And I think I was just thinking about this the other day, actually. Sometimes we can think of, in the UK, we might say, oh, black people are a minority. Maybe here, maybe they are in certain areas, but then white people are a minority in other places. If you go to Africa,
right,
I'd stand like a sore thumb, wouldn't I?
Same in China. Yep.
So it just strikes me as silly, really petty, that people draw these sort of lines where they try to, at the end of the day, we are all human.
I had a friend in middle school who visited Germany. I would love to go. My mother's family's from Germany. He visited Germany, and he came back, and he told me, I was like, wow, what was it like? Now, bear in mind, we're like 12 or 13 years old. I was like, what was it like in Germany? He was like, look, I was the tallest person in the whole country. I was the tallest person, and all of the women were beautiful. All of them were beautiful. Yeah. That's what he told me. So that's Germany as far as he's concerned.
Don't you find as well, without stereotyping, that different cultures, different races have their own kind of unique sort of peculiarities? I know people stereotype them, but generally speaking, most Polish people I've met are lovely people.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean this in the nicest possible way. The few German people I've ever met are very, very blunt, very straight. And for a British person, it comes across as rude.
Harsh, yeah.
And you have to say, well, no, they're not being rude. That's their culture,
Yeah.
But then I don't really know how Brits come across. How do Brits come across to other people? Are we laid back? Do we? I know we're constantly running ourselves down and saying how rubbish we are.
That's funny. It's funny because I'll tell you what. Listen, like, it may be different in different parts of the United States. You might just call this the Midwest. So I have a certain opinion. But when it comes to British people, I think the stereotypes that come to mind are that you're very polite. So that's like one of the first things that comes to mind. You're very polite.
I think we generally don't like to cause a fuss.
Yes.
So we're very agreeable.
Agreeable, yes. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Industrious too, I would say, only because historically, when an American thinks about the British, we think about the East India Trading Company, we think about the colonies, we think about the impact that you had, your naval success and with trade. To
Mm.
me, I think the transformation of England to be what it is today. That is the model for the United States in more ways than one. So I think that we feel like brothers with the British
Yes.
in many ways. Like I remember when Obama was elected the first time, there was a bust of Winston Churchill. I don't know if you remember this story. That was a gift
Mm.
from the British, or I
That's
think it
right.
was a gift. And Obama sent the bust back to England. And there's a certain portion of the population, mostly they were conservatives at the time because Obama was a Democrat. We were like, why what a disgraceful and disrespectful thing to do. Why would you do that? So in some ways, we look at our relationship with England and with a English figure like Churchill, almost like he's one of our own. I don't know if it's probably not the same with you. It's probably not the same with the British. Because I imagine most of Europe thinks that Americans are dumb and fat and brutish, and that's basically it. That we're a bunch of
again, it's
racists.
stereotypes, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're all racist, and all you ever eat is burgers.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I spent a bit of time in New York a few years back, and just absolutely lovely people.
I've never been.
So many nice people. They're just so polite and helpful, and really fascinated with the British accent. Every time I open their mouth, oh, you're a Brit. Can you say? And then they'd ask me to say things, like hello, cup of tea.
Yes. So that's another thing. So you asked me about first impressions or stereotypes. That's another thing that is common. We imagine the British are very intelligent in general, and it has to do with your accent, because this must be just like a pop culture Hollywood thing. But when you have somebody with a British accent in an American movie, it's usually a sage-like figure. It's a wise.
They normally sort of speak, hello, I'm British. What? We don't talk like that.
Yeah. Hip hip cheerio.
Jolly good fellow.
Yeah. So I like that's another thing that fascinates me is what we may have talked a bit about this before, because I know you had that one lady on your podcast who was from New Jersey, and I was telling you just in direct messages the difference between the way I speak and the way she speaks. Did you notice it?
Yes.
So in the UK, this is beyond me. I don't know, but it seems to me like the North has a certain accent. The North has a certain accent. London has a certain accent, and that there is a like a more I don't know. I would say a royal sort of a fancy way of speaking that I'm trying to think of an example. Like the person that comes to mind is he's an actor whose name I can't remember. You ever see the movie The Last Samurai?
Oh, yeah.
There's a British fella in there. He was also in Harry Potter. He was the oh geez, I'm blanking on the name. The point is, how about what's that? Oh man, names are really, really difficult for me to come up with on the spot. Point is that there is a affected sort of a British accent that to me sounds like aristocratic type of an accent, you might say. A lot of R rolling.
We've got what we call received pronunciation, which is kind of my accent. It's very popular around London. It's very popular around sort of Cambridge, Oxford, those sort of areas. But then you've got like your Cockneys, which is hello, Gov, how you doing? It's all good. Right in the front, right in the back. Now, I used to be that way. That's how I spoke. Absolutely. And then I moved from southeast London up north, where everyone speaks, very I can't even do the accent, but kind of Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire.
Yorkshire, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what happened was my Cockney accent sort of fell to one side, and I started speaking a bit better. But it's really funny if you listen to those podcasts where me and Matthew were speaking the other day.
Oh, you went back into it.
Did you notice?
I didn't notice. No.
Yeah, if you listen back to those straight away, I'm like, "Hello, how you doing?" It's so strange.
What about the R? What about the R rolling? You don't do any of that.
No, I don't do that. No. Received pronunciation is very, very straight, very bland, very. It's almost you can't quite place where the person's from, and that's kind of what I've fallen into. But then you've got others, that down sort of Cornwall way, yes, I know where you're from.
So you're
the Scottish,
Yep. So the way you're describing the London accent, we call that non-regional. So it's like the way you would hear somebody in New York speak is very much like they would speak in California.
Yeah.
I don't think that's much different from the way I speak, but people will point out things that I say that sound a little off. Like sometimes I'll say water instead of water.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I say water.
See. Water.
Water. Oh dear.
That's another thing is when you pronounce the ER sound, like the R, the hard R that is very common in American English, it seems like it's hit or miss with British English. Harry Potter is a big cultural phenomenon. It's Potter. It's not Potter. It's not Potter, but it is, right?
Potter.
I mean,
yeah. So Potter. I would say Harry Potter.
Harry, like there's no H. Harry Potter. Harry
Potter. In my mind, I'm saying the H. Harry Potter. But so you're not hearing that, are you?
No. I can hear it from you. But there is a certain type of English accent that I can't point to that drops the H and the ER sounds like an A. And it's very common, right?
Right.
The ER sounds like an A.
We'd say Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, yeah.
Harry Potter.
Yeah. Now,
what's
funny is that we have that here. We have that here still on the East Coast. If you go back to the original colonies, if you go to Boston, they park the car at the Harvard Yard.
Oh, dear.
They park the car at the Harvard Yard.
Not the car.
That's how they speak. But I park the car at the Harvard Yard. You know what I mean?
I would park the car at the Harvard Yard. And once upon a time, I parked the car at the Harvard Yard.
At the Harvard Yard. I like it.
I love it.
I love it too.
Oh, dear.
Another thing that I learned in probably right around late high school time. Listen, I didn't. This is just like another one of those. Maybe I should be embarrassed as an American to say this, but you get the idea. I didn't understand that calling you English if you were from Scotland was offensive.
Oh, yes.
Right? Because to me, Great Britain is England. That you know what I mean? Like that's almost that's how we generalize it, right? It's like the British conquered you. You used to be a Pict and you used to be a Celt, but now you come under the umbrella of the monarchy of England. You're part of the English crown. Right, that's how we see it. So to call somebody who's from Wales even English, I had no idea.
England, Scotland, and Ireland. So originally, Great Britain was just Scotland and England, and then Wales came into it, and then even later we got Ireland came in, but we don't refer to Ireland as Great Britain. We refer to Great Britain as Wales, England, and Scotland.
See, that's
the
news to me.
Kingdom includes Ireland.
That's the distinction. I see.
Yeah, but and only part of Ireland, just Northern Ireland, not
just Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland is obviously its own thing still. But at one point, the whole of Ireland was associated with Great Britain, but now it's not.
Do you find it do you find it strange that the term United Kingdom and Great Britain to me are synonyms?
You think they're the same? Yeah, no, they're
Yeah, that's. I
yeah.
would say that is a commonplace. That would be a commonplace like error that we would make here.
Yeah, no, Great Britain's only the mainland.
Interesting. See, I'm learning
Yeah,
something.
Scotland, England, and Wales. I'm just going to check, make sure I've got that right. Great Britain, because I don't want to be getting this wrong. Great Britain is UK and Great Britain? No. So Great Britain is the official collective name of England, Scotland, and Wales. It does not include Northern Ireland and should never be used interchangeably with the UK.
Interesting. So we were talking about racism earlier, and I want to ask you this question too. Between Scots and Irish and Welsh and Cornishmen and Englishmen, do you have that same? I mean, there must be stereotypes, but do you have that kind of like discrimination? What's that like?
There is a bit. There is a bit on that. Yeah.
Well, be more specific. What do you? What are the?
Well, I think the Scots hate the English. That might be an overkill, but the Scottish are very much about wanting their independence. A lot of them, not all.
Oh yeah,
they want their independence from, and I mean they've even got their own parliament now, haven't they?
Oh,
the Scottish Parliament. But obviously, still a lot of stuff still comes up from London up. I think the general sort of thought is that Scotland is such a culturally rich with history and, it's its own people, but it literally is going into another country when you go to Scotland, and you can feel it. You can feel it's completely different.
Do they? So my historical knowledge is so sparse, so forgive me, but I'm aware that the Roman Empire never expanded beyond Hadrian's Wall, and that the line between northern England and Scotland is basically Hadrian's Wall. So correct me if I'm wrong, but do the Scottish people have pride to this day that they were never conquered like the British?
I think so, yeah.
So
I've spent a lot of time up in Scotland, and I love it. That's kind of where I'd like to end up eventually, living in Scotland. But yeah, you can literally feel as you leave England and you go over that border, you're in another world.
Are they like are the Scots like tough guys? Is that the general?
I think that generally comes across that they're quite tough. But again, I think a lot of that goes back to accents again, doesn't it? The Scottish accent is quite harsh sometimes. And I think, sometimes people hear that as an Englishman, you hear the Scots accent sounds harsh. And so straight away you think, oh, they're quite harsh people. They're not. They're lovely, lovely people.
Well, there are instances where you'll have British people speaking in a movie or even on TV where they're speaking English and there's subtitles because I can't understand you. I cannot understand you.
Yeah. That's great.
And then the
strange thing is, most of the telly that we watch in the UK is American.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we're well into our crime dramas, and CSI and Chicago Fire and.
Really?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I'm a fan of British television here. So I watch a lot of silly. I don't know any.
You're just breaking up a little bit there. Say that again. What do you watch?
I was just going to say there's several BBC shows that I watch, mostly because I like hearing the accents. It's not dominated by British TV, but I like it. I grew up with Monty Python and certain things
John
that got me into it.
Have you ever seen the Only Fools and Horses?
No.
Well, you must watch Only Fools and Horses.
All right, I'm writing it down.
Oh, so good. David Jason as Del Boy. You'll love it.
How much TV do you watch?
I actually do watch quite a lot of TV.
Do you watch
Yeah,
it at the
I
end
love
of the day when you're relaxing and you're trying to, unwind?
Yeah, I love it. I love watching TV, movies,
What
YouTube.
do you prefer, movies or these long series that we're having now?
Either, both. Yeah.
So if you haven't, well, this is a silly question, but you got all the same streaming services that we have available in the
Mm.
United States, right?
Yep. Netflix,
Have you
Prime. Yep.
yeah, have you watched Freud on Netflix?
No.
It's a show called Freud. If it's not gone, I would recommend that you put it on your list. It's about Sigmund Freud, and it's in German, so you have to read the subtitles. But as far as I'm concerned, it's worth it. It's a very, very, very good. And then there's one called Mind Hunters that you should put on the list also. And
I've seen that, but I've not looked at it yet. Good. Is it good?
It's good. It's about the early days of the FBI when they were trying to, for the first time, figure out serial killers, because we were seeing serial killers in the 60s and 70s. They were trying to get a task force together to figure out how to deal with serial killers, and it's really interesting. Really interesting, man.
You've seen it's based on a book, The Men Who Stare at Goats.
I remember it, but I don't think I saw it. I remember what it was about, though.
Yeah, it was a John Ronson, British writer, journalist. John Ronson wrote a book about. It was basically about how the American government were trying to use mind control, just coming back to minds again, to kill people with the power of thought.
Yep.
And they literally like sort of got a goat and they're just sort of staring at it for hours trying to kill it. And eventually I think the goat kills over, but it's probably just due to old age.
Yeah. Yeah, they did all kinds of crazy stuff. They did remote viewing. They were trying to get these people to tell them where did the Soviets have their missiles, and we're just going to bring some psychics together to figure out where they are. Some weird stuff, man.
There is. When we, I suppose we'll be wrapping up in a moment. When we get back together again for another chat at some point, I would love to get your opinions on Sisyphus.
Okay.
That was the guy that was punished by rolling a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll down to the bottom again, and then he'd have to start all over again. So Sisyphus is basically the idea that life doesn't have much of a purpose or a point. And it just dawned on me recently that I'm actually quite the philosophical pessimist.
Okay.
I do get enjoyment out of things, friendships and art and creativity and what have you. But I can't help but think, at the end of the day, what is the point? What is the point of it all? It doesn't really amount to anything that really matters.
I have an angle on this.
Yeah.
So what you're describing is nihilism, right? We can get into this frame of mind where we say, like the Buddhists say, life is suffering, and that's true, and that life is brutish and short, which is true. That it's that the world is full of malevolence and evil, which is true. All of and that in another 100 billion years or whatever it is, the I don't know how long the sun's going to last anyway, but it's going to burn out and it's going to supernova and all of the planets will be gone and no one will ever remember we were here, and all that's true. That's true. But here's my take. My take is, if we believe that all is one and that one thing is consciousness, and I have no problem calling that God, that what being is an opportunity for God to exist. It's an opportunity for God to act and feel. And how do you place a value on that? We might see it from our perspectives as brutish and short and terrible, but even the idea that God, that it's possible through God to feel pain, and even if that is all that was ever created was the sensation of pain, it's better than nothing. It's God's way of knowing that it exists.
Yeah.
You and I are God's way of knowing we exist. And I'm staring at you and you're staring back at me, and we're both seeing God, and we're having this beautiful conversation that we're both enjoying, that's enriching both of our lives. As momentary as it is, it's better than if it didn't exist.
Better than nothing. Yeah. Love it.
It's the best I can do.
I'm going to say goodbye to all our listeners.
Thank you, Darren, for having me.
Thanks for joining us again. Drop in again soon. Bye for now.